Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Lounge Alley. This is Coloring Comics stream, where I'm going to continue coloring John Buscema's Conan the Barbarian. This is something that I was talking about the previous stream, using comics as a way of learning, as a way of understanding the process, and familiarize yourself with all different parts of creating comics, like backgrounds, understanding nature, little features here and there that will help construct a really cool panel like this one that you're seeing over here. I will be continuing to do some inking, because, well, why not, right? It is part of coloring comics, making comics, and I noticed that despite this having a lot of it finished, there's still certain things that I missed. And hopefully by doing a lot of this, I will make some room to actually color today. But it's coming to a point where I'm running out of panels to color. A lot of them are still in pencil form. So this is one of the biggest reasons why I'm actually resorting to inking now. But this is the panel that that you guys are currently seeing me work on. This one right here. Oh, and also, well, here's another reason what's great about working from comics or copying comics. As a learning process, it gives you an opportunity to practice things like inking. And I really do enjoy the process. But it is very challenging because the room for error is very small. You could make corrections, of course. You can white things out. And you could even redraw something and then paste it over your mistake. But it's just more time consuming. So it really pushes to pick your lines wisely and to really concentrate and make sure that when it comes to, for instance, in this case, inking really thin lines. Whoops. I made a thick one just as I said it. And maintaining the consistency with it becomes the top priority. And this is why I'm doing it. I'm challenging myself to get better, to have more control over mediums, to have a more steady hand in order to be able to get better. And that translates to pencils as well. So if I have a steady hand, making sure all the lines are really as thin and thick as they are intended to be, doing it in one motion without having to correct things over and over and over again. In turn, it makes you more flexible with the tool, more in control over it, giving you opportunities to draw faster, to get better results, and to really enjoy the process. So before moving over, I'm going to just make little detail marks here and there. The more I draw, and especially looking at older comics, looking at older illustrations, I start to wonder how many people knew about each other's work and how many people were influenced by each other. These little dots that I see and these feathering lines, and then looking at Mobius's work and seeing that concept being taken to the next level, and you see that like how intricate all the details are, and like how he puts these little textures all over his drawings. I always wonder, like, where did that influence come from? Now, I don't believe that it's always a matter of influence. Like, sometimes it's just a coincidence. You know, of course, there's people who just draw things and then they share a similar aesthetic. Sometimes it's just like a mistake. You know, some people are a little bit too might get a little too confused by the idea of coincidence. You know, for instance, there's a story that was told by Martin Scorsese when he was making Taxi Driver, and this is something that I was watching when I was watching Taxi Driver. It was like the after features after the movie, and he was talking about the story of this guy who ended up going to his office. Strange looking dude marched into his office, demanded to see Scorsese, and when the receptionist there was like, well, he's not here, you know, he stepped out and he's like, it's okay, I'm gonna stick around. And eventually he goes into the office to speak to Scorsese, and he looks at Scorsese and he says, who told you about me? And Scorsese is like, excuse me? He's like, you made that movie, Taxi Driver. Who told you about my life? You know, he was just so convinced, you know, and I guess he got paranoid that it emulated so much of his own life. You know, so he thought that he was being followed, and, you know, all the different parts of his life were being recorded and then used for the movie. And Scorsese is like, look, you know, this is one of the things about art, is that it's meant to sometimes imitate life. You know, that certain things just end up lining up with how things are in real life, you know, depicting reality, depicting certain characteristics of people. And just because you see similarity doesn't mean that it's because somebody's like stalking you and like following you and you know, recording all your moves and all that other stuff. So just like on that topic, the idea of like coincidence versus influence, and just thought it was an interesting thing. And I'm sure a lot of times people have felt like that, you know, if they're like watching a movie and they're like, oh my god, this is so much like me. And that's like part of the beauty of art, is that it highlights how we are connected. You know, there's a lot of times that people watch a movie and they're like, oh my god, that describes just how I am or how I feel. But it could be that was the intention, is that it's able to, or the artist did such a great job at capturing something that is present in all of us, that people connect with, and it really resonates with them. You know, same thing with like singers, musicians, when they're able to sing songs about things that are happening in current events and describing emotions and feelings that a lot of people can identify with. And that's part of the allure of it, right? It's like it really moves you, literally, figuratively and literally. It really moves you. You start swaying to the music because it really connects with you and your feelings and your emotions and the ideas that you've had. It's this way of expressing connection. And that's what's so amazing about it, about the entire field. Of course, it has its drawbacks as well. One of the biggest ones that I talk about frequently is how much responsibility should an artist feel for the way that they express themselves and the ideas that they convey or put out. I think it's still a very challenging premise in a sense, because you have a lot of people who emulate stuff as a way of having an identity, like where people are like, I'm gonna be this movie character, I'm gonna be this personality from a movie or a series, or a performance artist in some way, where they have a certain way that they present themselves on stage, and people take it and they emulate that as a day-to-day thing, which is kind of crazy, because there is no real day-to-day basis for it. It's only meant to be there for the duration of the performance. So, you see a character in a movie and it's only an hour and a half or 2 hours, and a person is basing their entire life, year after year after year, based on this character that doesn't have more existence beyond that 2 hour span. So people start behaving in this way over and over and over again in repeat mode, thinking that they're this like personality or character from a movie or a show or music video or music performer. It's kind of insane, but that really has to do with, I believe, education. Like, this is something that I spoke about before when I was on this topic. I think really the solution is not to limit people's ability to express themselves and share ideas and their thoughts. It's to improve. Like, if you want to change the fact that people are making these terrible decisions, or kids are making really stupid decisions based on these movies, or musicians and performers or whatever else, then change the education system. Have it in a way where it really improves people's ability to like rationalize, reason through things, understand things like, yeah, this is only a performance, it's only meant to be temporary, and it's based on the fact that they're doing it in front of a bunch of different type of people, so their defense line is a lot higher as opposed to my day-to-day. It's a whole different reality, kind of. So their ability to understand things, their ability to reason, differentiate between what's real and what's fantasy, what's meant to be just entertaining period of time. I think that is really the solution. And more people have to push for that, because it's definitely not going to change in the hands of politicians and capitalists and fascists. Like, they want you to be stupid. They want you to buy their dumb products. They want you to not think critically so they can lie to you, and you could buy all the nonsense that they say or that they promise in order to keep collecting your taxes for their yachts. Of course they're going to do that. And until you tell them, like, hey, you're getting out of here. You're not getting any of this stuff. In fact, you're going to lose all of it. And most of them don't even need a warning. They should just be removed and replaced by people who actually want to do their job. But yeah, it's to wait and expect those kind of people to grow conscious and realize, like, this is really destructive, and it's incredibly arrogant and self-centered and crazy for me to continue to do this and exploit people. Like, I'm a horrible person. I'm a terrible human being because I get off on this. And I need some serious help. I think I need some therapy. And they're not going to do that. So yeah, just going back to that idea of like, well, should artists take on that responsibility? And unequivocally, I'm going to say no. I think education systems need to take that on, and people have to push for that to change, because, as I mentioned, nobody else wants to. No one else will. Even people who are working in these like education institutions, they've established themselves or got themselves in there to exploit it for that reason. So until the point where parents and just citizens in general start to take action, they're just gonna keep placing themselves in these positions that allow them to wreak havoc on people's liveliness, the economy, the future for everybody, and how much people are going to enjoy their lives. Yeah, they're just going to continue to make things worse. On a different note, but in close to the same concept, this is something that I was actually thinking about for a while now, and I'd love to hear what you guys think, really about any of this stuff, for you guys to take time to think about it, express your point of view, express your opinion. What are your thoughts, or what you agree with, what you don't agree with, what are your experiences that might relate to some of the things that I talk about, or might not. Really is just room to discuss that, an open invitation to have some dialogue. But this topic really has to do more with art itself, like illustration particularly, or not even. But I'm gonna say for now, I would say for illustration. So I think from people who aren't in the industry, who are not illustrators, they tend to, and I've noticed this from just freelance work, interacting with people who are interested in, commissions and hiring people to do things, and personal experience of people trying to hire me to do certain things. I noticed that a lot of people just don't understand the process and what exactly they're paying for. And I think because their entire structure of work is based on hours, they find that to be like the fairest form of assessing value. They would say like, hey, based on your hourly rate, I will pay you this to do this, this, and this. Now, my question is, does the quality of art depend on time? Should somebody get paid more because it took them longer to do something than somebody else? Or should someone get paid less if they're able to do it fast? I think that really is like one of the biggest problems when it comes to that system. Is I believe no. I don't think that time has anything to do with it, because that's essentially what illustrators are working themselves towards, or just naturally it becomes that they're really good at drawing. So they're able to do a really detailed drawing that otherwise it would take somebody who's just beginning or intermediate much longer to do in a short period of time. So all their life, they're basically taking their entire life. There's a reason why the person is hiring them to do that, is because they can't sit down and do it themselves. If they practice for a month, Oh, sorry about that. If they practiced for like a month, they still wouldn't be able to do it at the same level as somebody who's an expert. That's something that took them a lifetime to get to. Like it took them years and years and years of being able to get to a point where in a matter of an hour they can create something really compelling and really interesting or beautiful or whatever it is, really. They develop that skill. So to say that, well, I'm going to pay you less because it only took you an hour to do it is thievery. It is exploitation. And it doesn't make any sense. It's based off of another system that really does matter. So like, instance, for some other field, right? If, what's a good example of it? I don't know. For somebody to hand-pick potatoes, right? They're in a garden, they need to hand-pick potatoes. So that's something that they can do in like half an hour. So if it takes them half an hour to do it, it's fair for them to get a half hour's wage. They don't have to spend an entire life line to like be able to do that. So an hourly wage for that seems fair. Although I personally would argue that if it takes you an entire day to do something, like you spend an entire day, you should be getting a wage that's worth a day's work. But yeah, just in terms of like, hourly pay, I think that it makes more sense in that vein because, yeah, it took them an hour and they picked all the potatoes that you needed them to do it. Whereas if you're an illustrator and you've developed a skill, they're paying you for a lifelong skill that you've developed. And obviously they like the work. So they're hiring you not just for the skill, they're hiring you for your aesthetic, for your ability to create things from your own imagination, not a common imagination, not a common piece of work, where that everybody can access, that anybody could tap into and do. It's very much pertaining to you and what you're producing. That you're getting hired for it. And also, on that line, if a person, let's say, is intermediate and it took them like 2-3 hours to do it, it doesn't make sense for them to get paid when you more for it, essentially. Like, let's say the person who is experienced is charging $30 an hour, $40 an hour. I'm just throwing out numbers here. Of course, it's a lot more than that. And the same thing comes for the intermediate one. They're like, well, I'm going to hire for anybody who wants to do it for $30 an hour. So you got intermediate, you got an advanced person. They're both working for the same wage. So the person who's intermediate ends up getting paid more. They're essentially doing the same job for $30 an hour, but they're getting paid more, even though it takes them a lot longer. Whereas somebody who's more professional, it doesn't take them that long. It only takes them an hour to produce the same quality work, if not better. So on that line, it just doesn't make any sense to base it off of an hourly wage. It really has to do with the work. So if the person produces what you're looking for, it has to be based off of the skill, not hours, how many hours it took them to do it. Just on that example, it doesn't make any sense. Why should somebody who is intermediate get paid to do the same exact job for the same wage, but get paid more? So yeah, I don't think that time equals quality of work in that field. You know, maybe when it comes to picking potatoes, yeah, you know, if time does equal the amount of work, because if you make them, if they have to work for 6 hours, let's say, or 5 hours picking potatoes, they're going to pick a lot of potatoes in those 5 hours. But yeah, I have noticed that a lot of people who are interested in that field, or were interested in hiring artists or whatever, they're totally unaware of that idea. It's like they really like art. They like what something looks like, but they don't want to pay the price for it. And I've had run-ins with some of those as well, where it's like, I might have told this story before. And I've had other ones as well. It's just this one really highlights that reality, or that level of unrealistic expectation. I had a guy who looked at my work and they're like, I really like it. You know, at the time I was working in the school, and they approached me. It was somebody random, and they were like, you know, I saw your work and I really liked it, and I wanted to see if I can hire you to do like a portrait for me of my family. And I was like, all right, well, you know, do you want to talk about the details? Like, what are you looking for? And he went in and he started talking about, you know, I have this black and white image of my family, and it's a small image. It's not too large, but I would like a large painting. And he said something like 63 by 80 or something. I don't remember. It was a while back. 63 by 80 inches, canvas size, for it to be replicated on that size in color. So it's a black and white image. It's a really small picture, which means there isn't a lot of detail that is noticeable. And he had a time frame of like a really short one. I forget what it was. I think it might have been like a month or so, and he wanted it for a ridiculously cheap price. And I was like, so let me get this straight. You want something that isn't in color to be turned into color, that's black and white. I'm gonna have to buy all this material stuff based on the price that you gave me. You also want it to be done on a large canvas, which is going to be time consuming, while I'm also doing another job as well. You know, so considering that there's going to be another job, there is going to be that I have to work, you know, that there are all these other things involved. I was like, that's unrealistic. You know, I'm not going to be able to do other stuff that pay the bills as well, and also produce all this stuff in such a short period of time. It's not worth it. You know, I have to consider all that time and effort that's going to go into it, and where I'm going to be once I end up paying my bills. You know, it's unrealistic expectations, and of course, it's a terrible price for it. And I think I would suggest to always consider materials involved. Like if you're not doing it digitally, if they're asking for traditional stuff, they have to pay for the materials, because that's also your materials that are being used for it, which you're going to have to spend money on to replenish. So you might end up just making enough to buy your materials back. Like after you pay rent, they get a new painting that's done to their liking. Oh, and he also wanted it in the style of like Zorn. If you guys are familiar with that painter, very realistic work. He said your work is close. I would like it to be similar to this. So he had really high expectations, professional level, like real professional level portrait work for almost nothing. And I was like, no, I'm sorry. That's I don't think I even apologized because I was like so insulted by that. I was like, you really don't think about this stuff at all. The fact that this is somebody's time and they have to come out with it being worth that effort. Just a very selfish and self-centered way of approaching the scenario. Just being like, I really want a really great painting. Like, I don't really care what's going to happen for you and your time spent. I just want this painting done. And this is where it matters. Very thin lines. I almost want to hold my breath to make sure that the lines come out exactly. Damn it. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. Like just the slightest thickness. Yeah, I would say the most important part about that is time. How much effort you're going to have to put into making sure it all gets done. And, the profit really should be the reward to it. That you're actually making money, not losing any, because you have to pay bills and you got to do all this other stuff. Like, these are necessities, these are essentials that you have to make sure. So at the end of that project, you should be able to save money. Like at the end of all the stuff that you have to pay to finish your month's obligation, you should have profit. You should have something left over and more, especially for big jobs like that. And it was already, apparent from my other work that's why he wanted to hire me, is because he saw that that's possible. But despite that, he was still trying to get this done at a ridiculously cheap rate. And he said, oh, well, what you're charging me is too much. And I'm like, I went and I saw other artists and they were giving me a different quote. And I was like, well, good. You can go and you can talk to them and have them do it for you then. Which is absurd. Like, I feel bad for those people. Like, they have to do all that amount of work. And most likely, if that was the case, they probably didn't do it at the level that he expected to. They just did enough. And the terrible part about that is if they do, they end up creating that standard, because that person could go to somebody else and be like, yeah, I got this painting done, this beautiful piece of work for this ridiculously low price. So that person that likes that ends up going and hiring somebody else and saying, well, you know, there's somebody who did this level of work, showing them a photo or whatever and being like, they got charged this much for it. And now this expectation is growing amongst people who are not in any way part of that field, but they just want what the field offers. You know, having those expectations and not actually paying people the right amount. So it's like a danger zone, really. It becomes this thing where, and that's exactly where we are now in that field, is there are so many people who are pursuing it and trying to make a living off of it, that they're willing to actually do that level of work and just not really come out with anything that's rewarding at the end of it, aside from the fact that they got away with one more month of paying bills with their work, and now crossing their fingers and hoping that somebody else is going to come along and have them get just enough to be able to pay things off. And that's ridiculous. And you guys can see how important visuals are to pretty much everything, whether it's a company, you know, you see like McDonald's, right? And instantly when you're driving and you see the sign, you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go to that place. You don't have to read about it. You don't have to like hear a whole dissertation about it. You just look at an image that was created, designed, and automatically this company is banking in on that, you know. So, you know, there's a documentary, and it's a really good documentary. It's one of my favorite documentaries for, I think, forever. After I've seen it, it's called How Art Made the World. It's a BBC documentary, and it talks about exactly that. And it goes through periods of history and just highlights how much, how big of a role art has in pretty much shaping everything, whether it's politics, whether it's our day-to-day, whether it's our ability to drive, you know, recognizing signs and all this other stuff, what we entertain ourselves with after we get out of work, right? We're either listening to music or playing games or going to a museum or whatever it is. Really, a lot of it has to do with artists, and it has to do with creativity. So for people to say get a real job, it's like, well, guy, good luck finding yourself entertainment if that's your perspective. You know, if you don't consider art to be a real job or to have any real value, then don't go to movies. You know, don't go to the theaters, don't go to movies, don't go listening to live music. Those are all art forms. And if everybody should be getting a real job, well then, say goodbye to all those things. But yeah, if you guys can get your hands on How Art Made the World documentary, it's absolutely worth it. There's like, I believe there's like 4 or 5 sessions to it, or parts to it. And each part talks about different periods of time, you know, going all the way back to caveman periods until modern day history. And it just really highlights how it really did shape history throughout time. So let me just double check here. These are all pretty much inked, I want to say. And I'm going to start on this. There's still some time. I'm going to say we got 15 minutes left in today's stream, so I'm going to spend that time inking the rest. I feel like this comic book is slowly coming apart. Like every time I'm touching it, I could feel how frail it is. And I'm like, I'm anticipating for it to just crumble in my hands. It's a little frustrating, I'll be honest, because it's a very important book. And this is probably why I'm having a hard time, because this is dry. Alright, well, give me a minute. I will be right back. Gonna give this a wash. And, yeah, bring some life into this pen. Despite it being closed, you know, it's encapsulated in this. But still, the fact that I can wash it, it's worth it. Alright, I'll be right back. Okay, we should get some flowing lines going. Just gonna give it a quick dry. Get as much water out as possible because that really dilutes the ink. Okay, let's give it a shot. I'm gonna flip over to one page dedicated to that. This poor guy's trapped in this darkness. Slowly, it's like creeping on him. I feel like this is like my basement or something. Like I'm keeping this guy in the basement and I'm opening up the door and it's like trapped in there and I'm making it darker and darker. And it doesn't help that the pose is very much suggesting like agony. Maybe that should do it. The lines are getting slightly darker. There's some places on the drawing itself where I can have to straighten out the tip as well. I did some pressing there, so like fanned out the brush. But for those of you who are looking for work as illustrators, I would say don't get disheartened by it. You're going to come across a lot of people who do that. You know, there's people who are, for instance, incredibly jealous that you have this ability, that you've trained yourself this ability. A lot of them wish they were able to do that instead of working the job that they hate. But the way they make themselves feel better is saying, like, well, I have money and, you know, you got to work for me. As a way of saying, like, you may have the skill, but you have something I want, which is money. So, and they'll look at ways to assert themselves in that way, which is pretty toxic. And it's always apparent when they have these, like, really unrealistic expectations. And there are some people who are just genuinely not aware of any of this stuff. You know, they don't take the time to actually research this stuff or think about it, like, well, in terms of, you know, the person who's going to be spending most of their time and what they need to get in return for it has to be comparable. Like, they just want a job to be done, and that's pretty much it. But yeah, I suggest to just keep looking, you know, find work and really think about it in terms of time. Like, set yourself realistic expectations and be like, is this going to be worth the time? Like, despite you wanting to say yes to it, it might end up being that you're going to spend way more time and you're going to put yourself in debt, or you know, take up time that you could be doing something that really is actually helping you save more and give you more time to look for better work. So as an illustrator, as somebody who's pursuing it, I focus on that. Think about that for sure before you take a job offer or anything of that sort. Think about, well, and do the math for it. Where is it going to leave me at the end, and how long is it really going to take me? You know, considering materials, considering bills. Is this actually worth it? And also be wary of certain clients, because they will, like, some people do, like, as I mentioned, look for exploitation opportunities. So they might get you to do all that work, and then they'll be like, well, it's not exactly as I wanted to, so here's only part of it. So you have to consider that, and that's one of the reasons why it's important to have contracts. That include things like revision, how many, you know, and then past the revisions, like how much they should be charged. Like, if you say you only get one revision, well, how much are they gonna need to pay after that one revision? And I personally wouldn't suggest working on anything unless they're willing to put down a starting amount. So that way you know that they're serious about this. Now it's a little bit easier because there are websites that actually mitigate that kind of stuff, which is great. You know, it really saves people a lot of times not having to deal with that stuff. So I could imagine how much more difficult it was back then. This is a really important line. This is what's going to determine whether he looks really angry, grumpy, or kind of sad. You know, the angle of that line of this mouth can determine that. Some of you might notice and you're like, oh, you're holding the pen really close to the tip. I think a lot of it has to do with the angle of the brush, because there's so much variation possible. You know, it's a thick brush, and if you have it angled, there's a bigger chance that you're going to make a thick stroke. Whereas if you hold it up like this, you know, if I'm holding it at a distance, I'm going to have to do this in order to make sure that, let's give it a shot. I think that the variation, the line variation becomes a lot bigger. The chances of you making a thick line becomes a lot more likely. Whereas if you hold it a little closer to the tip, you're able to angle the brush in a way where it's just the tip that's touching the paper. But I'm also sure that a lot of it has to do with tension as well. Like, I could feel myself tensing up my hand because I'm like, I really want to get this line down. You know, I want to make sure it's very controlled. You know, if it's loose, you know, just like the pencil concept, if it's loose, then that means it's going to travel around the paper more, and I need it to be very steady. So holding it tight might bring that steadiness when really that's not the case. You're just not used to, or at least I'm not used to that level of pressure with this brush pen. And I would think, like, just naturally, you know, the further I am from the tip, the less I could feel the tip itself. You know, when I am using this brush pen, part of the process is being able to really feel at what point do the bristles start to touch the paper. And it's a very sensitive experience. You know, if you press too hard, you're going to get a really thick line that's not going to work well, especially when it comes to face detail. And that's one of the reasons why I have to wash this frequently, because it is important for it to stay pretty pliable. You know, for instance, when I make this very thin brush stroke, if it was dried out, I'd have to press harder, and then whoops, all of a sudden that line on the mouth is like really thick. In order for me to get any ink on paper. To be honest, it still feels kind of... I'm gonna have to open up my basement door again. Still feels kind of dry. I think I might have dried it out too much, but it also could mean that not enough ink is traveling from the pen itself. Bottom line is I'm gonna have to show this pen some attention after. Probably refill it more. I do remember in the beginning when I did refill it, when I would squeeze it, I would have so much ink traveling down to the tip that I would have to actually squeeze out a lot of it using that rag. Whereas now it's like barely any. Which I think is an indication I really need to fill it up well. Whoa, way past the time. Gonna have to cut the stream, y'all. gonna have to end it here. Right after I finish this little jewel design. Got carried away focusing on this brush pen. But fret not, if you guys enjoy this content, I will be back tomorrow, same time and place, for more figure drawing basics at 8. And I'm going to be continuing with my project, something that I'm working on for my imagination. You guys can tune in then. It's at 9 p.m. So 8 p.m. is figure drawing, 9 p.m. is going to be the project stream. And yeah, I'll be back for that as well. So if you guys enjoy this content, remember to hit the like and subscribe button. They both help the stream and are greatly appreciated by yours truly. And take time to check out the Patreon page. Maybe there's a tier there that might interest you, and you could access that in the About section of the stream, all the way on the right hand side. If you guys are interested in seeing more content, stuff that I've posted all the way from the beginning, actually, of the Art Lounge Alley, you guys can go to the video section and filter based on collection, where you will find playlists dedicated for each stream. You guys can go back as far as the first episode, or the first stream rather, of any of these streams. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone, and I will see you very soon.